Axis Mundi, the world tree, connects the many layers, worlds, and facets of our universe. The lower world of watery roots provides access points to deep self-knowledge and the realms of those who have come before us. The midworld of earth and form holds humanity and all physical things, a bridge where connections emerge. And the upper world, billowing in its airy canopy, expands with spirit and the magic of source. Traveling these roads of the Axis Mundi is you, a fiery spark of conscious life. Through this podcast, we meet beyond time and space to explore the information found along the vast arterial pathways of the universal Axis Mundi. In each episode, follow your unique compass through this journey of self-knowledge, taking what resonates and leaving the rest. My name is Meg Bartlett, and this is the Axis Channel. Hello and welcome to another episode here on the Axis Channel. My name is Meg Bartlett, and today we are talking about some very real life experiences that I've been having, experiences that some of my family members have actually been a part of as well. We've collectively experienced these things, and all of this is kind of leading us to sort of these unexplainable events that have been happening lately. You know, there's a lot of people that have been talking about an increase in synchronicities, lots of deja vu, intense dreams, unexplainable events, and everything in between. And so we're going to kind of dive into my experiences, why I think, you know, this is coming up at this time. We're going to talk a little bit more about timelines and the different layers of existence as well. We touched on this in episode 2 a little bit. We're just going to continue that conversation today with this as well. But most of this is a very intense, like actual real life experience. Like these are actual things that are happening in my Midgard life. You know, when we think about the Axis Mundi, the world tree, we have these different layers that we can experience in our human existence, but our everyday life is in Midgard. It's the Middle Earth. It's the plane of where we exist. And there's just a lot of crazy stuff going on in this area for me. And I want to share that with you today. Always remember, as we go through these episodes, to take what resonates and leave the rest. My purpose is to expose you to different philosophical and spiritual concepts, but it's up to you to take what resonates and to leave the rest. If something really hits home for you, fantastic. Continue to explore that a little bit more, dive into it, see what it means for you. If it's not for you, if it doesn't resonate, then I'm doing my job that way as well. Check it off of your list and move on to the next thing. All right, let's get into it. So I've been having a ton of people telling me about their intense dreams, telling me about these synchronicities that are just off the chain, just flying off the handle. It's almost like every day people are coming into contact with things that are just unexplainable. You know, I had a friend who recently saw the exact same number, like an angel number, but she saw it every single day for like 2 weeks in multiple different fashions and capacities. There have been a ton of people reaching out to me about super intense dreams, unexplainable events like hearing footsteps or seeing shadows passing by or having almost like a disconnect with the people in their lives. And I've been experiencing this as well. You know, there's a lot of people that are talking about, you know, the veil is thinning. That's the type of phrasing that seems to be going on right now. And I don't know if it's so much a thinning of a veil as it is just more awareness of different timelines and layers of existence and all of the things that are going on around us. So let's dive into some of this. We'll get to talking about the timelines and layers at the end. And I just want to share with you my experiences first and foremost, because you are not alone. Like if crazy shit has been happening to you, believe it, right? Like it's your experience. And this is really just showing us more of the world that we already live in. So some of the little things that I've been experiencing are seeing orbs of light all around my house, or even when I'm out and about, just seeing the light shift in different ways and having weird experiences with, you know, even just light bulbs burning out. Like, you know, we've gone through our house and we've been replacing some of the light bulbs since we moved into this house back in September. And some of the, you know, like I'll go to turn on a light and it'll just completely burn out, like with the loud noise and everything, just like boom, it just burns out. And then we have to change the light bulbs. We've, I think, changed all of the light bulbs in our house at this point, which, you know, there's probably some significance to that as well, shining my own light in my own house and replacing some of that, energetic aspect from the previous owners, but still it's been really interesting. We've had computers glitching everywhere. I've been trying to, it's almost like I'm being redirected sometimes when I'm looking up certain things and the internet just goes out, or if I'm trying to contact someone or getting ready to send an email. And it's like, no, you need to take a step back and think about this. And we're actually having technological glitches in our house that are kind of, making me slow down and take a hot minute to think through things. We've been hearing voices. I've been seeing shadows walking around the house. Shadows don't have to be a negative thing. Just want to clarify that. But I have been seeing almost outlines of people or entities or something like that just moving about the house. I don't feel threatened by them. I want to clarify that as well. But it's just been really interesting. Sometimes I'll be working at my desk and I'll see someone standing in the doorway and I'll, do a double take and I'm like, wait a minute, like, who is that? It's just fascinating. So those are, just some of like the little everyday occurrences. And then we have some of these bigger concepts that have been going on for a while. So the biggest one is, I believe there is a parallel version of myself living in this house. And this is where we're going to talk about timelines real quick. So I recently wrote a piece about timelines. For those of you who don't know, I also have a blog on my website called Axis Alchemy. And I wrote a piece on timelines and shifting, converging, collapsing, what all of that means. And I kind of define how I see timelines as well. So if you're interested in diving into that a little bit more, head over to my website and check that one out. But in that article, I detail 2 different timelines that we can choose or be exposed to at any given point. So the first are individual timelines. This is me choosing the life and the work that I do, how I show up in my everyday life, who I'm married to, what house I live in. All of these different factors are kind of my choosing. So this is my individual timeline that I have chosen. An example that I have in my waking life is that when I was in the military, very early on, when I was like 19, I joined. That timeline required a very different physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual mindset than how I exist today. So the timeline that I live in right now, I am a dream interpreter, oracle, galactic historian, podcaster, all of these different titles, but how I approach my life and what I'm doing with that is very starkly different from the timeline that I was existing in earlier in life. And so this is kind of like, I've experienced a timeline shift. It didn't happen overnight, but it certainly was a big shift that I can see just in my own lifetime between different timelines. So that's an individual timeline. And then we have societal timelines. Societal timelines are, much broader. It's usually, all of the people that you are exposed to are living within a same or similar societal timeline. And so this could be, right now I live in Minnesota in the United States, but in another existence, it could be possible that in another societal timeline that I could be living in Minnesota, but it's not the United States of America. Maybe it's a different government body or entity, something like that. But all of the people would still be living their lives. I might be doing the exact same work, living in the exact same house, married to the exact same person in that timeline. It's just a different societal shift. And I'm bringing this up because there's been almost, like a lot of questioning about why there's so much suffering in the world. And I really want to talk on this because I think it's very pertinent to the veil thinning, the layers, the awareness that we have of timelines that's coming through. There's a lot of questioning that's going on, and it is right to question everything. And through my own questioning, I have found that there's so much war and grief and suffering and just bullshit happening in the world today that it's hard to look at it, right? And I asked myself, why is this happening? Why does it feel like I can't do anything about it? Why am I existing in this point in time? Why is this even a thing? Like, it seems so ridiculous, some of the stuff that's going on right now. It's so obscene. It's so like, how do people even come up with this? How do people feel like this is a good course of action? How can you justify that to yourself? Looking at some of the leaders in our world and things like that. And long story short, I've come to an understanding that I live in this current societal timeline, the one with suffering, the one with the shit, the one with war, the one, like all of the craziness. I live in this one because this is where I am needed the most. It's not a punishment for me. It's not any decision that I made. there's no reason other than I am needed here. Like my light is needed here. My information is needed here. Whoever comes across my path that's also living in the same societal timeline that I am, they need to connect with me in a way, or listening to this podcast will open something up with you, whether you resonate with it or not. Like it's going to make you think a little bit more about your awareness and your own fucking life. And I think that's so important to acknowledge, because that's really been a big shift for me over the last couple of weeks, right? It's really helped me to settle in and say, okay, the world is going to be what it is. And my work really is needed here. And I think every person who is listening to this podcast, your work is needed here. There's a reason you're finding yourself in this timeline, and it's to bring your light forward. So don't feel bad about living a great life. Don't feel bad about not suffering, right? Like we need people not to suffer in this societal timeline so that we can really help the people who are suffering. It's kind of, like that age old saying that they have, like when you're on an airplane, you can't help anybody else until you put your own mask on first. We need so many people to put their own masks on and live a good ass life so that they can turn around and help other people through that. So if you're feeling guilty about any of the suffering, right? There's a lot of opportunity to feel that right now. When you think about, okay, all of these people on this other side of the globe are suffering in this way, or people even in my own neighborhood are suffering in this way. And why am I not suffering? Like, is it okay for me to be feeling good about my life? Is it okay for me to be existing in abundance? And, should I be feeling guilty about that? No, you should not be feeling guilty about that at all. We need people to be living an abundant life. We need people to be taking care of themselves, to be living the joy so that you can bring that joy even more into this existence. You are in this societal timeline for a reason. And if you are someone who is out there, who is suffering, who is experiencing the shit, who is really going through it right now, seek out the people who are living what appears to be, an abundant and, just wonderful life. They can really help to lift you up. We're really at a crucial time of bringing forth this awareness. There's one example I would bring forward with this as well. And it's kind of going back to the lifetime of Buddha. So I'm not an expert, but Buddha lived a lifetime where he was a prince. And one day he escaped the castle grounds and he was able to experience the world. But what he found was suffering and, just a lot of sickness and illness and people that were really struggling to get by. And he was so taken aback by this because he'd been sheltered from it for his whole life that he decided to do something about it, to explore what it meant for him, to dive into the philosophy, to try and figure out what he could do to better the world, to live as these other people were living so that he could understand how he could help them. And by the end of his life, he became an enlightened being. So he reached a state of internal balance and of enlightenment and understanding for why there was suffering in the world. And I believe that he understood that he was in his own societal timeline for a reason. He was there to help give people hope and give them a light and show them another way of being. And it's carried on, for centuries, right? For thousands of years, people have looked to Buddha and to his own path of enlightenment. And this is the type of echo that we all have the potential to leave on the world, right? And, he found himself in a really difficult societal timeline, but he was there for a reason, to be the light that continued to echo. And I would say that, as we're experiencing all of these things that are kind of happening, this is the whole purpose, is for you to choose your highest timeline within the societal timeline. So choose your personal timeline, really ask yourself, what is your purpose here and how can you help the world? You don't have to do spiritual work to help the world. You just have to show up as yourself, shine your light outwards, uplift people when they need help, and be conscious of your own needs as well, right? Take care of yourself and show people that shining a light is not a constant thing. It's really just understanding yourself and living in self-knowledge. Okay, so that's a little bit on timelines and how I view them. For more on that, check out my article. But let's get back to the parallel me. So if there is a possibility for me to be living in my individual timeline, and then collectively, I am sharing a societal timeline with many different people, that means that there are other timelines available. And I just see these as different possibilities of how I am existing. Some of these, even, I've come to understand I've already experienced. So what people call past lives, sure, they can be lives that were in a different time frame, but I'm starting to think and almost experience them in real time, right? So past lives almost feel like they're parallel It's just in a different time space, right? Just in a different age of the earth, a different era, if you will. So how I've come to the conclusion that there's a parallel me living in this same house, which sounds kind of crazy, right? But stick with me here. I have had so many different dreams. And I know we're talking about, real life waking things here in a second. But for me, it always starts in the dream space. And I've had many dreams where I have a literal veil over my eyes, where I wake up and I'm in my astral body, but I'm in my bedroom, literally in my bed. It looks almost identical, almost the same. And I get up out of bed, or I'll be standing next to the dresser or something else, and I will hear my own voice in my head, but I know that it's not me. I know that it's me, but I know that it's not me in this lifetime. And it's a really weird feeling, and I don't quite know how to describe it. But there's like the ultimate sense of knowing, right? Like this is me, but this is not me in the existence that I exist in. And there's a literal veil over my eyes, almost like a muslin or a cheesecloth, right? Like it's really grainy, but I can sort of see through it. But it's like a literal veil. And I'm looking around my room, and, in some of these dreams, I'll open up the closet and there's, like a different set of clothing, but pretty close to what I would be wearing. Or there's, certain items on my bedroom altar, but, not quite the same ones. And they're so similar, but very different still, like distinctly different. And I've started having conversations with this other version of myself. And what I've learned about this individual, and I think that they're also coming through here as well, because sometimes in my own waking life, if I see a shadow in the doorway, I'm like, oh, is that me? Is that the other me that's living in another layer, in another timeline, but in the same house? And I've come to the conclusion that we're doing very similar work, that this person is also spiritually inclined, like they're doing some sort of spiritual work, but I feel like they're doing more of the healing aspect. So they're doing something like Reiki or, I don't know, massage therapy or crystal healing or something like that, right? They're working with energy and they're directly a healer, whereas I am more of an information person and a reader in this current lifetime that I exist in. And the whole purpose is for us to exchange information, which I find absolutely fascinating. And to add to this even more, it's really funny because I'm a Gemini. And so, Gemini's, the astrological sign is the twins. So there's very much, twin energy here is kind of going on. But my husband is also a Gemini. And the me in this other parallel existence in my house is also married to another version of my husband. And I just think it's so bizarre. It's so funny, but it's been so expansive. I have learned so much about healing with my words. And in turn, I'm able to exchange information with this other version of myself where they are able to incorporate more information and words into their healing practice, right? So it's almost like we are accelerating and amplifying each other in our respective timelines. And I have the sneaking suspicion that we will eventually be joined in the same timeline. So I believe that it's possible that we could collapse into the same timeline where we would become the same person, where, I would be both a reader and a healer, both an information sharer and an energy worker in a way. And who knows what my husband would be, like that would be really interesting. I feel like we'd have to do that at the same time, but it's so bizarrely curious. And I don't know how else to tell you about this, so let me know if you have specific questions that might help guide me. I'd love to tell you more about this, but that's like a really interesting one. Now let's go a bit further with this parallel me experience, because I've been, talking to myself about this for the last couple of months. I've been experiencing this for a while, but it's hard to talk to other people about it without sounding crazy until I got the validation that I needed. And this is where we bring the waking life into it, right? So I have a friend who recently got an Akashic Records reading from an individual called Todd Bryson. And I am 100% going to recommend him on this podcast. I will put his information in the show notes below. The way that my friend was describing her session with him, I was so blown away. And it's like I could almost feel his resonance in the way that she was describing her session. Like I could feel his energy through her words. And I knew that I wanted this service. I wanted to explore my Akashic records with Todd, and I just knew that it was going to be really expansive for me. So I booked a session myself, and lo and behold, Todd is like one of the most legit energy people I've ever met, and like absolutely insane session. I don't seek out services a whole lot. I do a lot of exchanges, but I don't seek someone out often. And this was absolutely worth it. This was probably the most impactful spiritual session I've ever had. Reiki, other Akashic records, oracle readings, whatever it is, like this was on another level. And at some point during our session, Todd asked me, do you feel like there's a parallel version of you that you're in contact with? And I just like my whole being lit up, and I was like, holy fucking shit. Like I have not told a single person about this. I didn't even know how to talk to people about it. And this person that I'm meeting for the first time is telling me something that my soul knows to be true, that my experience is real, right? And like that validation was so impactful. And so the rest of the conversation continued on, and I'm sure that I'll, continue to digest that for a while, but it blew my mind. And so that's how I'm finally able to share this with you today, is the impact that I know, and I firmly believe that this is real for me. This is a part of my truth, and it's absolutely fascinating. So Todd Bryson, amazing with Akashic Records. I will leave his information in the show notes below. Go check him out. Go book a session with him. He's absolutely phenomenal. Okay. Some of the other real life experiences that I have had, and these are shared with my family. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, Brandon and I, my husband, we were both downstairs as we normally do, sitting on the couch, in the later parts of the evening. And it was just past midnight, and we were getting ready for bed. We were about to head upstairs when all of a sudden we heard someone walk in our front door and walk across the dining room above us. And we both looked at each other, and I said, "You heard that, right?" And he looked at me, and for the first time we've ever experienced anything together, he said, "Yes, I heard that." And I was like, okay, holy shit. Okay, well, maybe it's a real person, right? Like we should check this, hopefully there's not a home intruder, hopefully this is not going to be something not good. So we get up, and I notice our dog hasn't moved at all. Daruk is really sensitive, right, to what goes on in our house. He's constantly going and checking out new sounds and things like that. He didn't move an inch. He's just laying on the couch like nothing has happened. And I'm like, bruh, how have you not heard this? That's so strange for our dog not to hear it, but for us to experience it. So Brandon and I head upstairs, and we notice that both doors are locked, right? So nobody could have gotten in unless they close it behind them. But, the doors are locked, and we check under beds, we check in closets, we check everywhere, top to bottom. We go through our house, and there is nothing. And Daruk isn't freaking out, which really helps. It makes me feel like, nobody's actually in here. But then the questions start to set in, we literally heard another person, like a full ass grown adult, walk into our home and across the dining room. What does that mean? Is it a ghost? I didn't feel like it was a ghost or an earthbound spirit. I felt like it was something else, but I couldn't quite put words to it. And me being the person that I am, sometimes I put words up around my house. Usually I don't feel like I need them. The relationship that I have with my home is really solid. My home's job is to protect us. It's an exchange that we have. We take care of the house, and the house takes care of us. But it was just, I was like, maybe I just need to redo my wards. Maybe I just need to put up a little bit more of a barrier. And so I go to the front door, and I take my step onto my spiritual space, and I'm about to set up my circle. And there's all of a sudden this man standing next to me in my mind's eye. And this was not in waking life, right? He wasn't physically standing next to me, but it almost felt like that. And I could see him so clearly. And I was a little perturbed and concerned, but I didn't feel like he was there to harm me. I didn't feel, I didn't feel scared. It was more the not knowing what it was that was unsettling, right? And he was just standing right next to me, and he was very intently watching me. He was like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you about to do? Like, what is it that you're doing? Almost as if he wanted to learn what it was that I was doing. And so so I told my husband, right? I was like, there is a man standing right next to me. And my husband's like, okay, I don't know what to do with that. And I was like, I don't either. So we're just going to keep going here. And I go ahead and I continue. I set up my circle. I do some of my rituals and I welcome in, some of the different energies that I have to protect this house. And I continue on my way. And this guy was just watching me the whole time in a very curious, like he wanted to know what I was doing kind of way. And then I had an out loud conversation with him. And I said, if you are a spirit that has passed, know that you have passed and that in this point in time, I am the owner of this house and that I have the divine right to set up wards and this is where I live. I do not mean you any harm. But I also ask that you do not mean us any harm. And then something else popped into my head. And I said, if you are in another layer of existence, know that we are living in different time frames. And this is okay. We're just experiencing an overlap. And I am here to protect this house and take care of it just as I know you are. And that seemed to be enough for him. And he kind of faded away. And it was just really interesting. I did sleep with the light on that night though. I think so. So just take care of myself a little bit there. That was a really freaky one. And so for the next couple of days, Brandon and I were like, that was really weird. I don't know what to think about that, and it kind of faded off into the distance until we brought it back up again last weekend. So last weekend we go over to my in-laws' house. And there are several of us there. So it's Brandon, it's his brother and his brother's girlfriend, his mom and dad, and my niece was there. She was being watched by her grandparents. So we're all in the house together. And my father-in-law goes to put down my niece for bed. And so he goes into the basement and he's, sitting with her down there, trying to help her calm down and hopefully fall asleep. And everyone else, we're all sitting in the living room, having a drink and talking to each other. And we get on the topic of past loved ones. And we're talking about some of the loved ones that have passed out of our lives and, like the memories that we have of them and what we're thinking about. And all of a sudden, the five of us sitting upstairs, we hear the TV turning on downstairs. And we all kind of look at each other and we're like, why is he turning the TV on? And my mother-in-law says, I bet he was just having a hard time putting, her down. He's probably just trying to wear her out and just get her brain going so that she can fall asleep to the TV or something. We're like, okay. And so then we jump back into our conversation. About 10 minutes later, my father-in-law starts walking up the stairs, but we still hear the TV on. And so, we're kind of thinking like, well, he can't leave her down there with the TV. Is she coming back up with you? It's pretty late, like all of these thoughts are going through. And as soon as he puts his feet on the top stair on our level, the TV noise stops. And all five of us are kind of looking at him. We all get quiet and we're like, hey, did you have the TV on? Is Rory okay? And he was like, oh yeah, she's sleeping. And we were like, okay, but did you leave the TV on or did you have it on? And he's like, no, what are you talking about? And so we're all going through this confusion for a little bit, right? We're all kind of like, no, you had the TV on. And he's like, what are you talking about? There was nothing. I didn't hear anything. And we understand that there was noise that sounded like it was coming from the basement of a TV on our level, but that didn't exist in the basement on his level. And the five of us don't know what to make of that. And we look at each other and I'm like, you all heard that though, right? And they're like, yeah, we did. And everyone's just kind of like, I don't know what to do with this. This is really weird. And then I bring up the experience that Brandon and I had a couple of weeks prior as well. And they're all kind of like, wait, what? And so we're all kind of like, okay, this is really weird. This is just stuff that's starting to happen, just things that are happening and we're not alone in it, right? This isn't just one person experiencing it. This is now 5 people experiencing the same thing at the same time in the same way. That's a big deal to me. So that was just absolutely fascinating. And it's kind of got me thinking as well, what if we are starting to tap into different layers? What if there is another family of people who are living in that house in a different layer, in a different timeline, in a different existence, Maybe they're in the 1950s and the timelines are just, I don't know, exposing to each other, like maybe it's just exposing itself to each other. And what if we just were able to peel back that layer a little bit? Or what if it was one of the loved ones that we were talking about trying to come through, and just telling us that they're there and that they want us to acknowledge them? It's just these layers are thinning. The timelines are all lining up. It's who knows what it is, but it's fascinating, right? And that was probably one of the most impactful in-person, like real life experiences I've ever had, especially because 5 of us had the exact same experience, right? Like that's just bizarre to me. That is bizarre. Other than that, I have come into the knowledge that there are more individuals living in my house. So I came across the term recently, spirits of place. And spirits of place do not have to be associated with you. They can grow to love a family and attach themselves to them, but they're more just house spirits, right? And it doesn't have to be a representation of the house itself. It can be some sort of a spirit or fae entity or something like that, that just takes up residence in your home because they love the home, and they're there to take care of it and they're there to support it. One of these individuals I came into the knowledge of in the astral space. I was about to wake up one morning and I was sort of just laying in my 2 bodies at once sort of thing, right? So my astral body and my physical body, but I have that extra sense of awareness. I'm existing in both planes of existence at once, both in the physical plane and in the astral plane, and both in my bedroom, right? They're overlapping in this way. And all of a sudden I feel the bed sink next to me. And I open my astral eyes and I see a little girl sitting on the bed right next to my head. And I'm like, who are you? And I kind of sit up and she just smiles and giggles and she has long black hair and she has the biggest eyes, like bigger than human eyes, but not alien, definitely something from the earth plane, but like just absolutely fascinating. And she runs out of my bedroom and I get up out of my physical body. My astral body gets up and I astrally walk into the dining room, right? And I'm walking towards the kitchen and I'm following her and she stops right before entering the kitchen and she's just giggling the whole time. Like she's just so happy that I not only can see her, but then I'm following her around. She thinks it's hilarious. And I kneel down, to get on her level because she's, maybe the size of a 3 or 4-year-old. And, I'm like, hi, who are you? Like, what's your name? And she just giggles and she's just happy that I'm there. And I can't remember exactly what she said, but, she was like, time for you to go now. And then I found myself waking up in my physical body again. And so it's just, like now I know that there's some sort of playful child in our house that's just running around and having the time of her life. So I don't know. It's just really fascinating to come across all of these different things. And lastly, as we are just talking about weird experiences, and I want to hear what your weird experiences are as well, head over to my website, fill out the contact form. Let me know some of your stories. I would love to talk about some of them if you'd like to share them. But there's just been like so many random things going on. I just feel like I have to get them down for posterity, right? Like I'll come back to this episode at some point and be like, oh yeah, I remember when all that weird shit was happening. Well, look at my world now, sort of thing. There was even one day where I was sitting in the sauna at the gym. I was about ready to get up and walk out. And these 2 talkative girls walked in and they're kind of being loud. And I was a little irked, to begin with. I was like, whatever. They're just, talking and being loud. And I just kind of want to sit in silence. But I noticed immediately that they were talking about angel numbers. And they were talking about, so many signs and synchronicities. This one girl was like, I have seen the number 666 like 12 times today. She was like, to the point where my manager has been handing me papers with that number. My credit card statement, has the numbers 666 in a row on it, like just all of these really random things are coming up for her. And she's talking to her friend and she's like, I'm almost freaked out. It's like the devil's number. And her friend goes, well, it's not the devil's number. That's just what society wants you to believe in. That's to keep us small. And it's actually, like a really beautiful feminine number. And I turn and I'm like, I don't mean to be listening in, but your friend's totally right. Like this is not an evil number. This was just something the patriarchy was trying to take away from feminine empowerment, right? This number. And she's like, what? And they're kind of looking at me like, who the fuck are you? And I'm like, I don't know. Who the fuck are you? And so they're kind of talking and I'm just listening in. And the other girl starts talking about how she's been seeing the number 333 everywhere. And then they kind of get quiet. And I turn around because I hear this voice in my head that's just like, Meg, you should just say something because it's a magical moment. Why not? Like just add a bit of magic to everybody's life today. And I turn around and I'm like, okay, just because I'm listening in. They were like, yeah, what? And I was like, so whenever angel numbers come to me, I take it as a sign that I need to look in that area of my life with a little more depth, with a little more scrutiny, right? Like I just need to pay attention to whatever area of my life that number is pointing me towards. And the life path 3 number represents the path of the creator. So creating projects, creating art, creating writing, like all of these different things. And I was like, do you feel like at this point in your life, you're diving into a new creative project, or that you have been missing some creativity and you need to bring it back in? Is there something where you need to be paying attention to the creativity and the creation process in your life? And this girl started laughing her ass off. And she was like, yes, she was like, I just picked up photography for the first time in 10 years because I finally feel the creative energy again to dive into it. And she was like, and I'm just so excited. And she was like, I'm a little scared, because I don't know all the things, she's like, there's a lot that I have forgotten and I need to get back into it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, don't be afraid. Like, this is like totally, support that's coming through. That's like, yeah, keep going, bring that creative energy back in. And she's just laughing. And at that point I was like, all right, well, my time is up in here. I'm a little too hot. So have a good day. And they laughed on the way out. But, it's just this right time, right place, all the synchronicities. It's like, I'm really stepping into the flow, and in the flow, the right people, I walk into the paths of the right people. And it's also beneficial for me too. It's almost like, just a confirmation. Yes, you do know what you're talking about. Yes, you do have this connection, with the magic and with the spirit that you're bringing in. And it's a confirmation for me. So it's always an exchange, right? It's always an exchange. And it's just been a magical time. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this. So let me know if you're also experiencing like crazy synchronicities, breaking down of layers, coming into contact with other timelines. All of these things are happening right now. And I think this is one of those instances where we're just getting started, where these things are going to start happening more and more frequently with more and more clarity. We're going to start to see a little bit more of what's actually going on in the world, not just our physical experiences. And ultimately, I think it shows that the collective consciousness is growing and expanding at this time. We're doing it, like so many people have been talking about the shift and, shifting into this new plane of existence or bringing in new energy or blah, 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 whatever it is, right? Like we're actually seeing this impact playing out in the little things that are starting to show up in our individual lives, right? Like we're starting to see it on the individual level, and eventually we will see it on the larger societal scale as well, but it has to start individually first. So pay attention to all of the really interesting things that are happening. You are not alone. Pay attention to them, honor them, acknowledge them. The more that you acknowledge about the existences and the weird things that are happening around you, the more that you are allowing this new frequency, this new energy to come into this earth, the more that you are allowing our collective consciousness to level up, the more that you are bringing in your own loving awareness and filtering it into the collective timeline where it is needed the most. With that, we're going to start to wrap this episode up. However, I have a request for you. There is a future episode coming where we are going to do an animal symbolism workshop. So this episode is going to be focused on how to tap into your own unique animal wisdom. So whenever you see an animal in the dream space or see an animal in your waking life, something is repetitive. What does that symbol mean? Sure, we can always go and look up a book and we can check out the things in there, but your unique symbolism has its own language. So this episode is going to be focusing on how you yourself can find your own definition for animal symbolism and animal language. My request is for your examples. What animals have been popping up in your life recently? What symbolism has been coming to you? What are you seeing out in the world and what is the context of that? Is it a meditation that you've had? Is it something you've seen in the dream space? Is it, like the white squirrel that always goes berserk in your backyard every time that you step outside, right? Let me know what it is, and I would love to include that in the episode itself. Head on over to my website, fill out the contact form, message me on Instagram. However you can get a hold of me, do so. Let me know. I will include it in that future episode coming up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm so excited to continue experiencing all the weird ass shit, and I hope you are as well. Eclipse season is upon us, and there is a major eclipse coming up soon as well. More on that later. I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye.